They say some moments etch themselves into your soul so deeply that no matter how many years pass, you can still smell the air, hear the exact tone of a voice, feel the crushing weight on your chest. For me, that moment came on a day that was supposed to be mine, my birthday. A day when people usually celebrate life, blow out candles, and feel at least a little appreciated. Instead, I stood in my boss's office, staring into his smug face as he leaned back in his leather chair, folded his arms across his chest, and said words that would burn into my memory forever. "Happy birthday. Consider this my gift to you. You're fired." At first, I thought it was some kind of cruel joke. Who says that? Who uses someone's birthday as the perfect time to destroy them? But the look in his eyes told me it wasn't a joke. It was delight. He savored it, like a predator toying with its prey before the kill. I can still remember the exact sound of the clock ticking on the wall, the faint hum of the air conditioner, the way his lips curled when he said it. I was frozen, gripping the strap of my worn-out bag so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had worked for this company for 6 years. 6 years of coming in early, leaving late, covering for coworkers, saying yes to every project, every demand, even when it ate into my weekends, even when it meant missing family gatherings, even when my health started to crumble under the weight of endless overtime. And yet, all of it meant nothing. My reward for loyalty was humiliation. My birthday gift was unemployment. I remember stumbling out of his office, barely able to breathe as my coworkers tried to look busy, their eyes darting toward me but quickly away as if my downfall might be contagious. Nobody said a word, not sorry, not are you okay, just silence. The kind of silence that cuts deeper than words. I packed my few personal items, a photo frame of my mom, a coffee mug, a stack of sticky notes with half-finished to-do lists, and walked out of that building for what I thought would be the last time. But here's what my boss didn't know. That day, as broken as I felt, something inside me shifted. His cruelty lit a fire in me that would not burn out. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to embark on a path of revenge so meticulous, so devastating that by the time I was finished, he'd wish he had never even laid eyes on me. Before I explain how I dismantled his life piece by piece, you need to understand the full story, the man he was, the way he treated people, and why I couldn't just walk away. Because this wasn't just about me losing a job. It was about years of manipulation, exploitation, and cruelty, culminating in that one unforgettable sentence: "It's your gift." When I first joined the company, I was young, hungry, eager to prove myself. I thought I was lucky to even be hired. My boss, let's call him Mr. Collins, seemed charming at first. He wore tailored suits, spoke with confidence, and knew how to make people feel like they were part of something bigger. "We're a family here," he'd say, smiling, shaking hands, promising growth and opportunity. But it didn't take long before the mask slipped. Collins didn't see employees as people. He saw us as tools, useful when we performed, disposable when we faltered. He loved to pit coworkers against each other, dangling promotions like bait, whispering in one person's ear about how another was slacking. He thrived on chaos. He thrived on control. And he especially thrived on making people feel small. There were countless little humiliations over the years. He'd call me into meetings only to use me as an example of what not to do in front of everyone, even when I had done nothing wrong. He'd assign impossible tasks with unrealistic deadlines, then smirk when I looked exhausted. Once, after I worked 3 straight weekends on a project that saved the company thousands, he said, "Well, that's what we pay you for, don't expect applause." Every time I tried to stand up for myself, he'd raise an eyebrow and say something like, "Careful, jobs aren't forever." So when the day came and he told me I was fired on my birthday, it wasn't just the loss of a paycheck. It was years of abuse reaching a crescendo. He thought he had crushed me completely, but in reality, he had just given me purpose. Because as I walked out of that building, my box of belongings in my arms, the summer sun blinding my tear-filled eyes, I made a silent vow. I would not let him win. I would not let him walk away from this unscathed. One day, one way or another, I would make Mr. Collins regret ever making me his victim. And that vow, it would consume me. The first few weeks after losing that job were a blur. I felt like I was walking through life with no gravity, no direction. Every morning, my body would still wake me up at 6:30 like it had for years, as if it expected me to throw on my crumpled dress shirt, grab a coffee, and rush out the door. But instead, I'd sit there on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do now. The silence of my apartment felt like a punishment. No emails, no calls, no endless stream of problems to solve. Just me, the tick of the clock, and the echo of his words, "Happy birthday. Consider this my gift to you." It hurt more than I could admit, not just because of the financial strain I had rent, bills, student loans, but because of the humiliation. Collins had made sure I walked out in full view of everyone. He could have asked me to step out quietly. He could have done it after hours, but no, he wanted witnesses. He wanted to see me crumble. And judging by the looks on my coworkers' faces that day, he got what he wanted. But the thing about humiliation is it sticks. It festers. Every replay of that moment in my head made me angrier, sharper, more determined. I started replaying not just that day, but every incident, every little cruelty he had dished out over the years. Like the time he humiliated Sophie in accounting. She was a sweet woman in her 50s, had worked there longer than anyone. She made one mistake, entered a wrong figure, and Collins berated her in front of 20 people, calling her a dinosaur who should have retired years ago. She cried right there at her desk, and when I tried to comfort her later, she whispered, "He does this to keep us afraid." Or the time with Martin, one of the best guys in the IT department. Collins promised him a raise after leading a massive systems upgrade. Martin worked 12-hour days for 2 months. When it was done, Collins congratulated him, then conveniently forgot the raise had ever been discussed. Martin left a month later, broken and bitter. And me, I was no exception. I had been his go-to punching bag. My ideas, he'd steal them, present them in meetings like they were his. My successes, he'd downplay them or worse, attribute them to someone else. My mistakes, even the smallest typo in an email, would be magnified and weaponized. And every time I thought about quitting, he'd dangle just enough hope. "Stick around, I see a future for you here," to keep me hooked. I realized Collins wasn't just a bad boss. He was a parasite, feeding off people's insecurities, draining them of their confidence until they either left quietly or were discarded like trash. And he always managed to land on his feet, no matter who he stepped on. But something about me must have been different, because firing me on my birthday wasn't just business, it was personal. He enjoyed it. He relished the cruelty. And that meant one thing: deep down, he had always seen me as a threat. I started digging. At first, it was out of boredom, maybe even masochism. I still had access to a few of the company's online accounts. Someone had forgotten to revoke my credentials. So I poked around, checked old emails, looked at files I had saved. And the more I looked, the more cracks I started to see in the perfect facade Collins projected. There were discrepancies in financial reports, tiny ones but enough to raise questions. There were invoices paid to companies I didn't recognize, vendor accounts that seemed fake, and then there were the emails. Collins had a habit of keeping off-the-record conversations in writing, probably because he thought no one would ever catch him. I found threads where he joked with a supplier about rounding up costs and splitting the difference. I found messages where he instructed people to massage certain numbers before they went to the higher-ups. It hit me like a lightning bolt. Collins wasn't just a cruel boss, he was crooked. And suddenly my anger had direction. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about exposing him for the fraud he was. But before I could act, I needed to know more. And that meant getting closer than ever to the man who had thrown me away like garbage. If I was going to take him down, I needed to understand him, every weakness, every vice, every skeleton hiding in his closet. So I started watching. I knew where he lived, a gated community not far from the office. I knew where he drank, an expensive steakhouse bar where he liked to play the big shot for anyone who'd listen. And I knew what he valued most: power, reputation, and money. The more I watched, the more I realized Collins had built his entire identity on those 3 pillars. He drove a leased sports car he couldn't really afford. He bragged constantly about connections in high places, though most of them were shallow at best. And he worshipped money not as a tool, but as a god. To him, everything and everyone had a price. That was when my plan began to take shape. If Collins thought firing me on my birthday was the end of my story, he was wrong. It was just the beginning. Because I wasn't just going to get revenge. I was going to dismantle his empire, brick by brick, until the only gift left was the ruin of his own life. The real breaking point didn't happen the moment Collins fired me. No, that was the spark. The real fracture came afterward, in the days and weeks where the silence set in, where the consequences unfolded in ways I hadn't fully expected. I thought I could bounce back quickly. I told myself, I'll get another job, I'll land on my feet. But reality doesn't work like motivational posters. When I started applying, I hit wall after wall. Positions I was overqualified for rejected me without explanation. Recruiters who had once called me nonstop wouldn't return my emails. And then it dawned on me, Collins hadn't just fired me, he had blacklisted me. I found out when a former coworker, Anna, reached out quietly one night. She was hesitant, her voice low like she was afraid someone might hear. I shouldn't even be telling you this, she said, but Collins has been making calls. He's telling other firms you're unstable, that you got aggressive when he let you go, that you're not a team player. Aggressive me? The guy who had put his head down and swallowed humiliation for years? It was laughable. But in the world of business, perception is everything. If Collins painted me as toxic, no one would touch me. That's when the humiliation turned into something darker. I remember sitting at my kitchen table that night, staring at a pile of unpaid bills. My birthday cards were still on the counter unopened. My phone buzzed with texts from friends saying, "Happy birthday, man, hope it's a good one." I couldn't even respond. How could I tell them the truth, that the one day that was supposed to mean something had been twisted into the cruelest joke imaginable? That I was broke, blacklisted, and branded as unstable because of one man's lies. I cried that night, I'll admit it, not quiet tears, but ugly, choking sobs that shook my whole body. And in between the gasps of air, I kept hearing his voice in my head, "Happy birthday, it's my gift to you." Like he was mocking me in the dark, laughing while I fell apart. But something else grew out of those tears, clarity. Collins hadn't just ended my job, he had tried to end me. He wasn't satisfied with discarding me, he wanted to make sure I couldn't rise again. And that was the moment I knew walking away wasn't an option. If I did nothing, he'd keep winning. He'd keep tormenting people like Sophie and Martin. He'd keep climbing, built on the backs of the broken. And me, I'd fade into obscurity, just another victim of his games. No, not this time, not me. So I began to study him the way you study a disease. Coldly, patiently, I retraced every email I'd saved, every offhand comment he'd made over the years, every pattern of behavior I'd noticed. I remembered how he couldn't resist bragging about his wins, real or exaggerated. I remembered how he always wanted the spotlight but hated scrutiny. And I remembered his one true weakness, greed. Collins wasn't motivated by loyalty or passion or even pride. Everything he did was about money. And when it wasn't about money, it was about appearances that could lead to more money. He was a man who'd sell his soul for $1 if he thought it would buy him power. That greed, that was the crack in his armor. I knew if I could find the right pressure point, if I could dig into the fraud I suspected, I could not only destroy his reputation but make sure he was never in a position to hurt anyone again. The problem? Collins was careful. For all his arrogance, he wasn't stupid. He covered his tracks. He had cronies to take the fall for him, layers of paperwork that looked clean on the surface. If I came at him directly, he'd bury me before I could land a punch. So I had to think differently. I had to become invisible, patient. I had to be the thing he never expected, someone willing to wait, watch, and strike only when the timing was perfect. It was almost poetic. He thought firing me was a gift. But soon I was going to return the favor. And my gift to him would be the slow, spectacular unraveling of everything he had ever built. The first rule of revenge is patience. If you rush, you get sloppy. If you let anger steer you, you miss the details. I knew that if I wanted to bring Collins down, I had to approach it like a long game, every move calculated, every step deliberate. So I started small. Information was my weapon, and Collins had no idea I still had ways of getting it. Remember those access credentials they forgot to revoke? That was my golden ticket. At first, I just poked around harmlessly, revisiting old email chains, downloading files that seemed suspicious. But the more I looked, the more I realized there was a pattern hidden in plain sight. There were vendors who billed the company thousands every month, yet when I cross-referenced them, they didn't even exist. Shell companies, dummy accounts, and every single one of them linked back in some subtle way to Collins, sometimes through an associate, sometimes through a shared bank routing number, sometimes through his own damn email. The arrogance was breathtaking. He thought he was untouchable. I didn't move right away. I archived everything. Every invoice, every email, every signature. I started building a digital library of his corruption, piece by piece, like a prosecutor preparing for trial. I even backed it all up on multiple hard drives, because if Collins ever caught wind of what I was doing, I knew he'd stop at nothing to erase it. But I needed more than just documents. Paper alone doesn't destroy a man like Collins. His power wasn't in the money he stole, it was in the people he controlled, the image he projected. I had to dismantle him socially, professionally, and financially all at once. That's when I turned my attention to the people around him. Every predator has enablers. Collins surrounded himself with sycophants, people who kissed the ring in exchange for scraps, but sycophants are fickle. Their loyalty isn't to the man, it's to the benefits he provides. And I knew the moment Collins started to look weak, those same people would jump ship. All I had to do was plant the seeds. So I started reaching out quietly. Anonymous emails, encrypted messages, whispers in the right ears. I'd send a concerned tip to someone in HR about discrepancies in the books, a copy of a shady invoice to a department head, a casual question to a former supplier about a strange payment. Nothing big enough to expose myself, just enough to stir doubt, just enough to make people look twice at the man they thought they knew. And it worked. I could see the ripples from a distance. Collins started staying later at the office. His usual cocky swagger was replaced with a tightness in his jaw. He was snapping at people more often, micromanaging in ways he never used to. He knew something was off, but he couldn't put his finger on it, and the not knowing was eating at him. But there was one close call. One night while I was parked near his house, keeping tabs on his routine, I noticed headlights creeping up behind me. A security patrol car. The officer tapped on my window, flashlight beaming in my face. "What are you doing out here?" he asked. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would give me away. I forced a smile, muttered something about waiting for a friend in the neighborhood. He stared at me for a long moment before finally driving off. I sat there shaking for 10 minutes afterward, realizing just how dangerous this game really was. But the close call didn't scare me off. If anything, it sharpened my resolve. Because by then, I'd already uncovered the jackpot. The one piece of evidence that tied everything together, an email chain between Collins and his supposed vendor where he outright discussed inflating numbers and splitting profits. The kind of smoking gun investigators dream of. I remember staring at my screen that night, my hands trembling as I read the words over and over. It was all there. Proof of fraud, proof of embezzlement, proof that Collins wasn't just a cruel boss but a criminal. That was when the plan crystallized. I wasn't just going to embarrass him. I wasn't just going to leak a few documents and walk away. No. I was going to orchestrate his complete downfall. He had taken everything from me, my job, my reputation, my dignity. Now I was going to take everything from him, his money, his career, his freedom. And when the dust settled, everyone would know the truth about who he really was. All I had to do was wait for the perfect moment to strike. And as fate would have it, that moment was already on the horizon. Because Collins had just announced, loudly, arrogantly, to anyone who would listen, that he was being considered for a massive promotion to regional director. The kind of position that would put him over multiple offices with a salary and bonus package that could set him up for life. He bragged about it at the steakhouse bar, told his cronies it was already in the bag. That promotion was his pride, his future, his ultimate validation. Which made it the perfect stage for his destruction. When you're plotting revenge, timing is everything. You can't just swing blindly and hope to hit. You wait for the moment when the target is at their highest, most confident, most untouchable. That's when the fall hurts the most. And for Collins, that moment was his big promotion. The company had scheduled a formal announcement at a quarterly leadership summit. Dozens of executives, department heads, and board members would be there. Collins would stand on stage in his perfect suit, flash his fake smile, and bask in applause as they crowned him regional director. It was his coronation, his victory lap, and I was going to turn it into his execution. But first I needed allies, quiet ones. I reached out to Sophie, the woman from accounting he had humiliated years ago. She had retired since, but when I told her what I'd uncovered, her voice trembled with both anger and relief. "I always knew he was dirty," she whispered. "Tell me what you need." Then there was Martin from It. He'd never forgiven Collins for robbing him of that raise. When I showed him a fraction of the evidence, he leaned back, laughed bitterly, and said, "It's about damn time someone nailed him." He offered me technical support, ways to make sure documents couldn't be erased, ways to time their release so Collins couldn't wriggle free. Piece by piece, I built a quiet coalition of the broken and betrayed. Each one had a reason to see Collins fall. Each one gave me fragments of information, memories, access points I'd never have had alone. Together, we wove a noose around his neck, and he didn't even see it tightening. The night before the summit, I barely slept. My tiny apartment was littered with papers, USB drives, and printed emails covered in red marker like some kind of war map. I checked everything twice, then 3 times. The evidence package was ready: invoices, bank transfers, shell company registrations, and that damning email chain. Enough to not only kill his promotion, but to invite criminal charges. But evidence alone wasn't enough. It had to be seen. It had to explode in the most public, humiliating way possible. That's where Martin's genius came in. He helped me set up a timed release, documents scheduled to blast through the company's internal network right in the middle of the summit. Emails, PDFs, attachments all dumped into inboxes at once, with a subject line they couldn't ignore: Collins, the truth you need to see. I remember standing outside the hotel ballroom the next morning, dressed like just another guest, my heart pounding like a war drum. Inside, the room buzzed with chatter, waiters clinking glasses, executives schmoozing. At the front, the stage was lit, banners flying the company's colors, the CEO preparing his notes. And there was Collins, strutting through the crowd like a king already crowned. He didn't see me, of course he didn't. Why would he? In his mind, I was already dead and buried, forgot, just another casualty of his climb. The ceremony began. The CEO droned about growth, innovation, teamwork, all the lies Collins loved to wrap himself in. Then the words came, "And now I am proud to announce our new regional director." Collins adjusted his tie, stepped forward, ready to soak in the applause. That's when the first phone buzzed, then another, then a dozen more. All around the ballroom, executives glanced down at their devices, their smiles fading into confusion, then shock. Murmurs spread like wildfire. The CEO's voice faltered. Collins froze mid-step, blinking as if unsure why no one was clapping. And then the whispers started. "Is this real? Look at this." Oh my God. Screens lit up with his fraud, his emails, his invoices, everything. His crimes laid bare in black and white for the entire leadership team to see. I wish I could describe his face in that moment. The color drained, his lips parted, but no words came out. He looked around desperately, like a drowning man searching for air, but everywhere he turned he saw eyes filled with betrayal, disgust, and recognition. The CEO's jaw clenched as he read one of the emails aloud, voice trembling with rage. "Round up the numbers and we'll split the difference later. Keep it off the books." Gasps filled the room. The weight of silence afterward was heavier than any sound. Collins stammered, "This isn't what it looks like. It's taken out of context." But no one believed him. How could they? The evidence was undeniable. Security approached. His own peers turned away as if he were diseased. The coronation had turned into an execution, exactly as planned. And me, I slipped out quietly, my chest burning with a mix of adrenaline and vindication. The man who had laughed while destroying me on my birthday had just been destroyed in front of everyone who mattered to him. But the best part, that was only the beginning. Because public humiliation was one thing, but the legal consequences, those were still to come. The fallout was faster and more brutal than even I expected. Within hours of the summit, Collins was suspended pending investigation. Within days, the internal audit team had picked through the very files I'd exposed and found more dirt than even I had uncovered. Fraud, embezzlement, kickbacks. It wasn't just one scheme, it was years of rot tangled across multiple departments. And the company had no choice but to act. They couldn't protect him anymore, not with the board breathing down their necks, not with federal regulators already sniffing around. The promotion that Collins bragged about, the crown he thought was his by right, was stripped from him before it ever touched his head. His office was locked, his name scrubbed from company emails, his parking spot reassigned like he'd never existed. But humiliation at work was only the start. The documents didn't just go to the company. Remember that coalition I built? Sophie Martin and a few others helped me make sure the evidence landed in the right hands: local journalists, financial watchdogs, even law enforcement. And once the media got hold of it, Collins' pristine reputation collapsed overnight. Headlines branded him as the corrupt executive who lined his pockets while employees suffered. His face was plastered on news sites, his voice recordings played in clips where he bragged about rounding up numbers. The man who once relished the spotlight was now trapped in it, his every movement dissected, his name synonymous with scandal. And then came the legal hammer: subpoenas, investigations, bank accounts frozen, court summons. He tried to bluff, tried to spin it, but you can't charm your way out of financial crime when the paper trail is that damning. He was dragged through hearings, interrogated by lawyers, betrayed by the very cronies who once sang his praises. Loyalty vanished the moment the money dried up. I followed every update like a starving man devours a meal. Each headline, each new revelation was fuel. I can still remember the night I watched the evening news and saw him, disheveled and pale, being escorted out of a courthouse. No tailored suit, no smug grin, just a broken man clinging to the last scraps of his pride. It was everything I had dreamed of, but strangely, it wasn't enough. Because as satisfying as it was to see Collins fall, revenge isn't neat. It doesn't tie up all the wounds. The scars from the humiliation he caused me, the nights I sat in the dark feeling worthless, the career he tried to bury, those didn't vanish overnight. They lingered, reminding me of how close he came to destroying me completely. But then something unexpected happened. I got a call. It was from a recruiter at a rival firm. She said she'd seen my name connected to the whistleblower story. At first I panicked. Had I exposed myself? But then she said words I never thought I'd hear. "We're impressed. You did something most people wouldn't dare. We need someone with that kind of courage and integrity." Within a month, I had a new job, a better one. Higher pay, better culture, actual respect. The blacklist Collins tried to put me on, it backfired. Instead of ending my career, he had launched it to new heights. And as for Collins, last I heard, he was drowning in debt, his assets seized, his so-called friends gone silent. The courts had their claws in him, and prison wasn't off the table. His house was up for sale, his car repossessed. He had nothing left. I sometimes wonder if he remembers the words he said to me that day in that office when he thought he was untouchable. "Happy birthday, consider this my gift to you." Well, I gave him a gift in return, a gift wrapped in truth, tied with justice, delivered with precision, and unlike his, mine wasn't cruel for the sake of cruelty. Mine was fair, mine was earned. Because when you spend your life stepping on people, you forget one simple truth: the people you step on remember. And me, I remembered everything. If you stayed with me until the end of this story, thank you. People like Collins think they can crush others and walk away, but stories like mine prove otherwise. And if you want to hear more stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice served cold, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next.